Hello everyone, and welcome to this latest in our webinar series where we are once again looking at contract management software and technology, and our topic today is realizing the return on investment from contract management technology. I'm delighted to be joined today by Arthur Raguette. Arthur is Executive Vice President at Altria, and I think we have a quick recap of his resume here. This is always the most exciting moment, of course, giving the respective resumes. So, Arthur, great to have you back with us on one of our webinars. And I am Tim Cummins, the CEO at IACCM, and I will be just doing a brief introduction today, and I'll be here also for the Q&A. And you never know, Arthur, I may even be intervening every now and then as you're going through your presentation. So what about this overall topic? Well, the return on investment from contract management is a debate that without question is really hotting up. There are growing realizations in many organizations that this is in fact potentially one of the big untapped opportunity areas. And I'm going to set out a few reasons for that. But before I go into those reasons, let me comment a little bit about the broader state of technology. And many of you are perhaps familiar with a comprehensive report that we published just a few months ago on the state of automation in contract management. Copies of that available on our website. And what that report found was that in general, the levels of satisfaction with the historic contract lifecycle management software that was available were really pretty low. I think a number of key reasons for that, but the report found that there was relatively low user adoption in most organizations, and that one of the biggest problems was that any data that was generated was so fragmented because actually contract-related data pops up in all sorts of systems, and there really isn't any coherent place to go find it. Now, a lot of the problem with that, and certainly the technology has moved on, and you're going to be hearing a great stories from Altria today in terms of some of the tremendous things that they've brought to this particular field. But not only were the older systems perhaps more limited, but more importantly in many ways, the people who implemented them had not really taken the time to step back and relook at their process. What they had done was simply automated something that was in itself innately inefficient. So they had simply baked in inefficiency with expensive technologies that nobody then used. So if we're going to really make sense of all of this, it is important that you think laterally, you think across the contracting process, not just the tasks that are individually done within it, or that perhaps you as a function are doing. Where does it begin? Where does it end? Have you actually really thought through the operational costs that are associated overall with performing on contracts, and the amount of time, resource, and money that's wasted when you have perhaps lack of clarity over clear roles within the organization or within the contract, lack of clarity over obligations, or perhaps systems and methods that fail to extract and disseminate those obligations around the business and then actively monitor them? Do people know what they're supposed to be doing and when they're supposed to be doing it, or do you just leave it to chance? Are there endless battles over risk allocation in many of your contracts, and perhaps you're paying quite substantial price premiums as a result? For example, in the US construction industry, we discovered recently that, and this will be a feature of our conference in Toronto in 2 weeks' time, the price premium that people are paying when they go for a risk allocation model. Insufficient, incomplete information flows. To the people who need information, can they get it? When your sales organization, for example, is trying to sell to a new offering to a current customer, do they really have the data they need to support it? When people are doing billing, do they have the data they need to make sure it's accurate, etc.? And this, of course, leads to all sorts of errors, particularly in areas of pricing, price changes, charging levels, and then, of course, flowing into invoices. It's commonly believed that the average procurement organization, for example, can, particularly in services contracting, save some 5 to 7% of invoice value because of errors. Now, of course, the average procurement organization doesn't study the number of times the supplier is undercharging, and that would also seem to be in the region typically of 3 to 5%. And then do you get into regular disagreements over acceptance criteria, over the scope, over whether things are fee or free? Do you, as a result, finish up with significant numbers of claims, disputes, delays? How much of your time, how much of your colleagues' time is spent firefighting on issues associated with contract performance? We know in the majority of organizations that is a phenomenal amount of time, and many of you will know. Our data shows that around 9.2% of annual revenue, the equivalent of that amount of money, is actually eroded through weaknesses in the contracting process. So, for those of you on the program today, that leads us to the big question, which is, are you actually using your contracting process to drive, test, and ensure quality and efficiency through the organization? Or are you one of those that has used it and perhaps deployed old technology in a way that embeds inefficiency? So with that, Arthur, I'm going to pass to you and leave you the challenge of explaining how it could all be different.
Well, Tim, thank you very much, and I appreciate the size and the scope of the challenge you've thrown out today. Using your contracting process to drive quality and efficiency, or to embed inefficiency. Hopefully today we'll sort of go through some of our thoughts around how measuring efficiency and how promoting the encapsulation and embodiment of best practices in the contract management process within a contract lifecycle management solution can drive and realize significant value. Some of the numbers that you raised that came out of IACCM's own sort of in-house research is the baseline for some of the things we'll chat about today. Our fundamental goal for today's session, and again, I too would like to thank everyone for participating today, is to handle the relatively mundane task of helping folks put a dollar value or a euro value or a pound value, basically a hard currency value, on the gains expected from implementing a contemporary contract lifecycle platform. And we are, as a group, a bunch of realists. So we tend to look at things like the calculation of gain being something that will stand the test of a critical chief financial officer or controller. So while not particularly sexy, it is incredibly sexy if you worry about numbers and worry about making a big difference. So just to perhaps get us going with a brief overview of what is expected out of a contract lifecycle management platform, the basics of automating and streamlining certain contract processes. So we anticipate having, of course, and this is something that Alltree, of course, provides, a common central repository that allows the capture, storage, indexing, reporting, and viewing of contracts, their components. When I say components, I mean the individual clauses that make up the templates, the addendums, the attachments, the schedules, the exhibits, the full package, and for many of our customers, the auxiliary documents. Certificates of insurance. You had mentioned the construction, Tim, during your conversation. So I need a construction certificate of insurance. I need licenses of my engineers. I need to ensure that my environmental impact studies of my subcontractors are all captured and part and parcel of a particular capital build. Second is I need a robust and strong and extensible authoring environment. Sure, we're all used to sort of curling up with our favorite copy of Microsoft Word or perhaps Google Docs, but we need to have a more connected environment, one that allows us to use the centralized resources of clauses and fallback clauses and alternate clauses, and be able to draw from a library of templates made up of these clauses, and to enable self-service authoring through artificial intelligence-based wizard creations is just one way to extend sort of the centralized control that we associate with the professional contract manager out to the edge of the organization, to those folks who are closest to the trading party, whether it be salespeople looking at customer or distribution agreements, or standard T's and C's for the supply chain and procurement. In fact, this kind of automated collaborative environment drives the collaboration between the core stakeholders in the process. So internal collaboration within an organization is expedited, while similarly speeding up the process and streamlining the process of external negotiation. In fact, for those of you today who may have sort of trusted external parties, maybe distributors, maybe embedded supply chain partners, to allow contract negotiation to occur within the CLM with your external parties is something that we fully support and provide this kind of highly transparent and highly automated platform. From a core systems and solutions perspective, by being able to tie contract milestones with your operational systems so that we can compare the sort of target of truth being the contract value, the contract milestones, the contract obligations, and the entitlements, and tracking these back to your operational systems enhances both the value of the CLM, helps document the improvement to the business that you are driving as professionals, but also increasing the value of your existing transactional systems, your customer relationship management platforms, your operational systems, your ERPs and MRPs. And enabling personalized workflow so that we can come in from a Salesforce portal for creating sales contracts, or coming in from a vendor management environment to create renewals and extensions to existing supply chain contracts, and providing a level of granularity into performance of those contracts for performance and risk management, helps extend the value of your contract management platform, of the contract lifecycle management solution, to the edge and across organizations. I mean, ultimately, this is about reducing risk. And it's not just streamlining the process to save time, to save money. Both very, very valid things. But it's also to keep your name out of the Wall Street Journal for the wrong reasons. So reduced risk through audit preparedness, individual deal size risk by leveraging the core assets that have been developed by your team over time, and then extending into these non-core or non-legal core platforms to increase the user adoption that spreads the cost of the solution really across a larger base, to ultimately save money and save time, right? To have expedited turnaround for contracts and agreements. Now, for those of you who've joined the call today, we'd like to make this a little bit interactive. To reinforce what Tim had said earlier, please send questions as you wish through the questions function of your control panel. It should be on the right-hand side. And right now, we'd like to take a quick poll. So the poll is open. And we're asking, where are you in terms of maturity and stage within the organization for contract management automation? A, are you determining whether contract lifecycle management would be beneficial? Are you B, actively evaluating CLM solutions today? Or C, have you already started with a CLM solution and are simply looking to understand how to promote the value of that within your organization? So we'll leave polling open for about 15 seconds, which sounds short, but really isn't. And we'll give folks a chance to make some selections, and we'll see what the result may be. And we'll ask our sort of go-to-meeting administrator, can we go ahead and shut the poll and then share the poll results?
Yep. So indeed, Arthur, yes, we have the results in. Actually, a not uneven split here. We have 41% who are determining whether contract lifecycle management would be beneficial, and I suspect some of those may be people who have even tried it before and been somewhat disappointed. 27% who are actively evaluating, and 33% already working with a CLM solution. So 68%, I suppose, well, 67% actually, arithmetically, I guess, would be in the evaluation stage.
Excellent. So thank you very much for that summary. I'm finding it very interesting that more than a third of our attendees today are determining whether CLM would be beneficial. So hopefully, as we talk about some of the business value and business case in very concrete terms, we will be able to make believers out of some of us. As I said, as we sort of picked up the session, this will be a very practical approach. So I don't think that we will scare anybody away with basic math, but I thought we would, as we had to in primary and secondary school, show our work. There are a number of ways that organizations today have helped justify deploying a contract lifecycle platform. There are just as many sort of methods and modes within these, but we'll touch at a high level on each sort of core category and each method. And we'll step you through the math. And again, continue to ask questions, and I'm sure there'll be some heated debates at the end as to which of these is best for any one of you or best as a group for all of you. So while there's no doubt about the many benefits implementing a CLM solution, of course, to us who are sort of already on the other side of that doorway, 41% of you are here to determine, could this actually work for us? So we'll actually have a slide or two towards the end. How does a CLM bring quantitative value? Not qualified, but quantified. We know that we need to get project funding, even to start the evaluation process for a contract platform. People's time are not free. You need to be able to break this loose. So there are certain areas here that are very easy to determine and easy to estimate. So the reduction in legal employee costs, in other words, do I save money by reducing the amount of people I need in my contract administration, contract management teams? Nobody likes to think in terms of headcount reduction. So I like to think of it instead as what kind of productivity gain might we be able to expect? How can we look at prevention of financial loss using some industry best practice numbers to determine in aggregate, based on the size of the revenue of an organization, how much may be at stake? How can we reduce sales operation costs? This is really a matter of how do we reduce sales cycles so that sales teams can get more business done with the same size team. Why this is important, and I'll touch on it in a few minutes, is that if you were to walk in and tell a salesperson that your people we can reduce the cost of your current employees and then you can hire more people to make up the gap, they will immediately realize that their quota is going to go up, and that is not something that most sales organizations welcome. So instead, we look at what is the reduction in the sales cycle time so that individuals can get more deals done in the same amount of time. Things that have haunted many people. How do you handle your renewals and expiries? How do you ensure that you're not leaving money on the table in those events? And we'll also talk in a little bit more detail about how to make sure that you're only renewing profitable customers, or that you're not missing discount opportunities across your supply chain. The fifth, which is simply avoiding penalties or recapturing entitlements or penalties from your supply chain. And the one here that is supply chain specific, identification of consolidation opportunities. This is an oft overlooked strategy for supply chain folks in terms of both demand aggregation as well as supplier normalization. Your contract base is a magnificent place to start to provide some very direct, immediate hits to the bottom line. So let's take a look at reduction in legal employee costs. And really, this is reduction in the legal team. It's not particularly attorney. This is both attorney and non-attorney costs. With no disrespect meant to either pool, we do know that organizations may have slightly different hourly rates associated with it. I already see questions coming in saying, this looks like Excel. Can we have a copy? We can certainly provide a copy of our sort of ROI calculator or estimator to anybody who is interested, and we'll take that down towards the end of today's session. So if we look here at what are the cost elements from an employee perspective, we've got an average loaded rate for the number of attorneys versus the number of non-attorneys and what their hourly or daily or monthly costs may be. The math here is really based on a Goldman Sachs survey that says using a contract lifecycle management platform reduces the number of hours spent on contracts by 20%. So every organization has the ability to look at what their current contract administration, contract management costs are. And I would normally suggest the segmentation of outside counsel, inside counsel, and non-attorney staff. Now, this is a simplified example that we see here, so I've sort of lumped, or we've lumped attorneys into one pool, but we know that we've got varying rates, and increasingly the trend is to leverage self-service first, then LPO, then outside, then inside counsel. But many of the contracts that we deal with as a group never really make it to outside counsel. So in this scenario, let's just say that I've got 6 non-attorney folks that on average, they're spending 96 hours per month, and that their average loaded labor rate is $100 per hour. Compare that to 3 attorneys. They spend about 32 hours per person per month on contracts, and their average hourly rate is $200 an hour. If we follow the math, number of people times number of hours times an hourly rate, annualize that times 12, take 20% of that off the top as per the Goldman Sachs report, and we're looking at an organization with effectively 9 staff members being able to reallocate 1 full-time person, basically. Or flip it around, this means we should be able to do about 12% more contracts with the same team. So although $184,000 does not sound like a lot, this is just one particular method. And I think we'll see that for each of you, some combination of these 6 is the right fit. Prevention of financial losses. Now, this certainly has a more ominous feel to it, and this comes from the IACCM. Tim had mentioned that their research showed that there is a revenue loss, or hard dollar loss, of almost 9.2% every year due to poor contract management practices. Now, does that mean that by implementing a CLM, you're going to recoup all of that money immediately in year one, or will you recoup some of that money? Well, what we've done here from an ROI calculation is quite simply take your presumption of annual revenue, whether it's 500 million, a billion, 4, 10, 20 billion. And if we work off the baseline of 9.2%, we see what the potential for money or revenue loss looks like. And then what percentage of that can be recovered is really a matter of your level of risk appetite versus conservatism. I like to think that although you may be able to recoup all of that pretty quickly, let's say within 18 to 24 months, be at a level of efficiency that 9.2% is no longer an issue. But if we just take a billion-dollar company and presume that 50% of that 9.2 is recoverable in the first year or preventable in the first year, we're looking at a recoup savings or a value of $46 million. Certainly a little bit larger than the $184,000 we saw with respect to a small legal team optimization scenario, but we very quickly start looking at some reasonable dollars. As a friend of mine used to say, yeah, a million here, a million there, pretty soon you're talking about real money. If we look at reduction in sales operation costs, and here too, we don't want to think about, oh, taking people off the job. What we really want to look at is a reduction in the sales cycle time. In other words, according to the Aberdeen Group, those organizations who are using a CLM have a 24% reduction in sales cycle time. So if it took 4 weeks to close an order, I can now close that in 3 weeks. Or if it took 4 months, it's now 3 months. This allows my legal operations team, and that can include, and often does, sales management, sales controller function. I can now give them back 24% of their day. So if we assume that there's a little bit of overhead involved, let's just say that's a 20% increase in performance. Running basic math, and again, let's assume a small organization, 20 salespeople, average hourly rate, again, this would be loaded at $80 an hour, all right? Presume that with Benny's, they're floating about 160 grand a year. They work full-time. Please no comments about salespeople not working full-time. Right? That translates to a savings of $640,000, right? Or a performance improvement gain of $640,000, or 2/3 of $1,000,000. Renewable contract management is a place that we get a lot of questions about. Now, of course, Altria is in the business of selling software as a service, annual subscription licenses. So we understand and we know renewable contracts. One of the concerns that we hear is people not having sufficient advance notice that a renewal is coming up. And to some degree also that an expiry may be coming up. One of our customers has an unusual model in that for their IT purchases, they penalize their procurement team if they do not start on a renewal 60 days in advance of the renewal date. And if they wait to 30 days, their performance bonus is halved again. If they start ahead of the 60, they are, commensurately rewarded. It's straightforward that the more advance notice you have, the more information you have, the better the renegotiation will be. And we think about that when we look at our sales organizations, right? We want to make sure that we renew on time, that we look for opportunities to improve the customer relationship, perhaps cross-sell, upsell, and that those are deals in themselves and they take time. Waiting until a week before renewal is not the right way to go about it. So there are expected gains, typically in the 5 to 10% range, for appropriate management of sales agreements. One of the other benefits of this, and it's oft overlooked, is when you have customers that are not as profitable as you anticipated. We think about the typical sales organization, and the team that closes a deal in year 1 is rarely around in year 3. So my 3-year term, when it comes due, is now going to be evaluated by a different organization. So the aggressive pricing for the first year, maybe a very slight elevation for year 2 and year 3, simply may not have been enough. Or my per unit pricing was based on volume slabs, and the customer did not meet the extended volume level agreement to kick into a profitable mode for me. What some companies are able to do, and it's a good practice to think about, is rather than walk away from those low profitability customers, they now have the ability to renew them into their channel, where although the percentage of revenue may be less, the costs are considerably less, therefore the margin is net increased. So in addition to sort of the core of net increase on sales, there's also the opportunity to increase profitability through reallocation of resource across that value chain. So what we've seen, and I think Tim will bear this out, on the sales side of most organizations, we'll see between 20 and 30% of customer agreements are auto-renewable. They are effectively evergreen. If these renewable contracts are handled more effectively, then A, you can certainly renegotiate revenue with more foresight, and that lends itself to an increase in revenue on a per contract or per agreement or per customer basis. But also, we're looking at the effort to handle that renewal is significantly reduced with the CLM. All of the details, all of the history related to the initial contract signing is there. You've got all of your metadata, all of your line items are clearly demarked and available for reporting and analysis. This simply means you can make better decisions quickly and much more quicker than you otherwise might. In terms of monetization, this is, for me, one of the strongest business cases I've seen. And I'll explain why in a little bit. Let's just take a scenario where you've got 3,000 contracts. Average deal size on the sell side is $100,000. Let's take a conservative presumption that on average at renewal, each of these will increase by 5%. So average net new revenue on a $100,000 deal, 5% is quite simply 5,000 across 3,000 contracts. That's a quick 15 million. Now, yes, you can factor these, you can adjust based on your percentage of renewals, but the reason why this is so strong is that this is an enabling technology of a smart, contemporary contract management platform that integrates with your CRM or your order management platforms, enables visibility through the sales organization for upcoming contract renewals, and ensures that no contract is slipped through the cracks. And likewise provides the ability to go through, update your clauses, update your notification sections, do this all automatically for the reissue or the renewal, the issue of the amendment, which also has the added benefit typically of decreasing your DSO, your day sales outstanding, improving your collections. So it has some very direct, measurable financial impact. The fifth is the most, I'll say, nebulous or cloudy of the ROI methods. And this is avoiding penalties and or sort of capturing penalty payments from either your supply chain or your customer base. The trick here, and this is a politically sensitive one, it's not something that, let's say, outside consultants will typically use, but in the course of doing business, it is not uncommon that someone crosses a line or forgets to cross a T or dot an I, and there is either a penalty or a breach incident, but something where money changes hands because something was either not documented, not captured, or just done wrong. By having a contract lifecycle solution that goes past the point of contract signing into the ongoing management and performance of the contracts, Altria provides this kind of visibility to give you the warnings to avoid crossing the line. If this can help avoid penalties that might have been previously paid, this is a tremendous, I'll say, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt generator to help get champions on your side as you were looking for support within the organization. Right. Remember, Charlie, back in 2009 that this so-and-so happened and we had to pay XYZ, how much million? If we had this, we would not have gone down that path. So this is one that is less black and white, but can be incredibly powerful. I find that it is useful after you've got your initial teams on board, supply chains on board, your sales organizations on board, and you're just trying to get past compliance and risk. And an ROI scenario for the procurement organization, supply chain, identification of consolidation opportunities. Let's take a scenario of a company, maybe $1 billion to $1.5 billion in sales. They likely have about 300 million in manageable or addressable procurement. Typically, this is indirect material, that kind of thing, services. And I believe Tim had mentioned that when it came to renegotiating services and doing audits on your service providers, that the gains were anywhere from, I want to say, 5 to 7, maybe as much as 9%. There are also opportunities to manage your hard goods suppliers, folks who have deliverables of widgets, machinery, consumables for the running of your organization. By running contract analytics across your supply base, you can identify opportunities to consolidate your demand of your internal users, your business units, your teams, and using that consolidated demand, the standardization of demand, you can then look at reducing the number of suppliers and increasing the average volume per supplier. Now, you never want to do that, of course, down to a single supplier. That's risky, but taking a supplier pool of 20 down to a supplier pool of 4 or 5 for a particular commodity or service group can yield enough volume improvement where you will see anywhere from, at the conservative side, 3%, maybe as much as 5 to 7 for services management. What that translates to, if you're running about $1/3 of $1 billion in spend, so 300 million, is going to be, very close to, in this case, 900,000 or $1 million or $2. We've seen organizations net save, or rather save a net amount of between 14 and 18% with aggressive supplier normalization and spend visibility tied to the increase in contract knowledge. When you combine this with the post-award contract compliance and contract management, perhaps tying that also to entitlements or service level credits, you may be able to increase this number even farther. So it's not uncommon to see conservatively 3 to 5, more aggressively 10 to 12, hyper aggressively 14 to 20% reduction in savings, reduction in costs. And as anyone will tell you, every dollar you save is the same as $10 sold. So this has a direct impact to the profitability and bottom line performance of the company. So, in the last 15 or 20 minutes, we've covered a number of approaches. Each of these is sort of unique. Some of these can be combined. Some of them are more related to the softer side of labor savings and alternative resource allocations, such as reduction in legal opportunity or contract management costs, reduction in sales operation costs, penalty avoidance, also a little on the soft side. If I look at hard numbers, numbers to get people thinking, and numbers that will catch a CFO's attention in broader strokes, prevention of financial loss using the IACCM benchmark is a tremendous eye-opener. All right, all you have to do is take a look at your own quarterly statement and realize, okay, we did $2 billion in sales this quarter. What could we have not lost? Right, 9.2% of that number. If those numbers are too big, because it's awfully hard to walk into someone and say, hey, we could save $100 million. Maybe we need to come up with something a little more manageable, take a good strong look at management of renewable and expiring contracts. Although slightly more complex, it is much more tangible. It will help you build champions in both the sales and sales operations teams. And if we look at an additional sort of benefit around managing renewable contracts, you can tap into the supply chain fans as well. Still more than enough to generate sufficient return on investment. Obviously, we're talking here about gross numbers. In other words, we're not talking about percentages or multiples. If your path for contract lifecycle management is $1 million path, we see 46 times ROI, 2 times ROI. If your path towards CLM is 100,000, then we're looking at 2 times ROI, 6 times ROI, or 460 times ROI. The numbers are there. Our strong suggestion, I don't mean to over-personalize this, is to make sure that you are supporting your business case, that you know your team, you know what is needed to push the ball across the line. Right? You know what's going to be needed to get that meeting, to get that endorsement, to be given a budget for an exploratory discovery process, to analyze your processes as well as the technology that's available. One more poll, and then we'll get into some hard case study numbers. Which area of your contract lifecycle management process needs the most improvement? And please don't think of this as a penalty box kind of environment. This is really just for sort of broad strokes polling. So we'll ask our poll administrator, Mark, will you open the poll?
The poll is open.
Thank you, sir. So A, contract drafting and negotiation, or is obligation management and milestone tracking the area that needs the most improvement? Regulatory compliance management is your choice for C, or D, expiry and renewal management. For those of you who say, oh, it's all got to be updated, E is your choice. So again, A, contract drafting and negotiation. B, obligation management, including milestone tracking. C, regulatory compliance management. D, expiry and renewal management. Or E, all of the above. And we'll hold this open for 15 or 20 seconds or so. And please do keep those questions coming in. I want to hum the Jeopardy song. And sorry about that aside.
We have some answers here, Arthur. So a third of people are saying it's all of the above, so 33% on that choice. But the overall winner is actually around the issue of obligation management and tracking of milestones, which is, to be honest, where I'd expect it to be, certainly from the point of view of the optimum ROI. So 37% going for that one, 18% looking for some support in the drafting and negotiation, probably really wanted to drive faster response times, I suspect, since speed never stops being at the top of that executive agenda. Then we have 6% only on regulatory compliance and the same 6% on expiry and renewal management. In fact, one or two people have asked for a little clarity and have said, management of renewable contracts, can you elaborate on this, please? So I guess we may have some who don't actually operate with renewables in that way.
Ah, perfect. Okay. We can take that time now to sort of extend or expand on expiry or renewal management, or we can take that at the end. So how about we proceed, and we'll make sure that we address specifically renewal management and how it pertains to value creation. So let's step through two quick business cases, and I am keeping an eye on the time. So the first business case, which is actually, this is sort of a general statement, I'm sorry. For those of you, I believe it was 41% from our first poll that weren't sure that a CLM was right for you. If your organization signs hundreds and thousands of contracts, really I sort of cut that line at about a couple of thousand a year. If you're a global or disparately set organization, if you take more than a couple of days to review contracts, if it takes you more than 3 or 4 to draft the contract, if you're unable to measure contractual performance, which ties into that 18% that are saying they're interested in improving obligation management, this is certainly for you. And if you miss out on managing expiries and renewals, for those folks who ask for clarity, I'll touch on that in a second, or if you've got some level of compliance issues, these are reasons why you should be looking very hard at a contract lifecycle management solution. If we are sort of looking at the overall alignment, for those of you interested in contract authoring as a goal, some of the operational objectives include accelerating and making drafting easy through reusable components. So these are templates, contract types, subtypes, having templates with sections. Those sections have clauses. Having a dictionary for those allows for rapid and much more error-free creation. Realigning your resources internally. We talked about how a CLM can help reduce the amount of staff required for a particular unit of work when it comes to contract management, authorization, approval, and the like. And also integration with your CRMs and operational systems. This is where a cloud-based solution interfaces via web services to the contemporary systems you have in your shops today. We talked about ways that we can improve our financial performance, whether it is obligation and financial performance management, or whether it's tighter expiry and renewal management. And ensuring compliance through audit preparedness and tracking and managing supporting documents. These could be either customer docs or supply chain docs. This is probably a good point just to pause and just sort of define what renewal management is. On the sell side or customer side agreements, you may sign an agreement with a customer for a good or service that you give them, and it has generally an initial term. When we look at what a renewable contract is, or a renewal contract, this can be thought of in two general ways. I can have an automatic or evergreen renewal that says if neither party cancels the agreement, it will continue to a second term. And that second term might be the same as the first, could be shorter, it could be longer. A very realistic example, let's say you are licensing software as a service. You may sign up for a 3-year license term as your first, and then if neither party changes the agreement, at the end of the 3rd year, the contract or agreement will renew for a 1 additional 3-year term. So effectively, by doing nothing, we have a 6-year term. Slightly more flexible would be after that initial 3-year term. If no one does anything, it will renew successively for 1 year. And at the end of the 4th year, it will renew for another year. Now, why does this matter? You may have had price escalations, you may have had cost escalations. You may not want to renew at the same price for the second term. You need to be reminded that there is an evergreen contract coming up for automatic renewal so that you can make a conscious decision to allow that to renew, or you can use the contract management system itself, look at the obligation and entitlement management aspects of the contract performance with that other party, and decide whether to keep the deal or improve the deal for yourself. That is where we're looking, or where we see chances for upsell, because it also sort of forces you as the seller to evaluate what other goods or services might add value for your customer. It's not really about the money, it's about increasing and strengthening the relationship with your customer. On the supply chain side, you may have similar agreement that you have raw material or direct material at a particular price point. You've got a steady state supply. It automatically renews after 1 year. You may have an annual commitment to buy a certain volume from that supplier. If you don't hit that volume level, if you underperform, your per unit costs may go up. These are things that you want to reevaluate on renewal. You don't want to walk seamlessly into that field again if you have the opportunity to restructure, renegotiate, or simply change your relationship. So I hope that sort of gives you a sense of what renewal management is all about. And to some degree, of course, expiry management is the same. Just give me the appropriate heads up and tell me what my options are. So in the last couple of minutes of our time today, I'll walk quickly through two business cases, one top line and one bottom line, just to sort of show how these various value calculators or value levers can be assembled. So let's take a straightforward scenario of a billion-dollar company. I've got 9 folks working on contracts, 20 sales folks, do about 4,000 active. These are active contracts in a given year. My average contract value is $300,000, just for giggles. So if I'm looking at sort of broad strokes numbers, okay, taking the IACCM 9.2%, this tells me if I've got a 50% recovery rate against 9.2% revenue loss, I might have a target goal of saving amount, $46 million. If I want to go after this in terms of renewal management, I've got 4,000 active contracts, 30% of those are renewable or renewal. We know that there's a 5% gain on average for each contract that is renewable, and I've got a $300,000 contract value average simply by running the math, right? So 1,200 contracts, average contract value of $300,000 with a 5% revenue gain yields me $18 million in savings. So I can combine these perhaps for maximum impact and look at a $64 million value statement. But even if I just stick with one or the other, these are quite sizable against $1 billion in sales. And certainly the value derived is considerably more than any investment in the technology. Second case study, and this is on bottom line, so this is a supply chain. Let's take a $4 billion oil and gas company. They've got a particular business division that does $4 billion. They've got 14, both attorney and non-attorney folks working on contracts. They've got about 6,000 active supply contracts. The addressable procurement, in other words, the annual spend that they can adjust, is $1.2 billion. If we look at cost reduction only in this model, and look at improved performance or reallocation across the contract management team of 20%, yields a savings of $840,000 that can be redirected. By reducing the cycle time for the sales organization, for their sell-side contracts, we're looking at 44% reduction against 60 people, $200K average costing, yields $2.8 million in resource allocation. Now those numbers are not bad, right? So 840 plus 2.8 yields about 3.637. If I'm looking for a larger impact, though, I can look at the change to procurement. So out of my 1.2 billion in spent, if I'm looking at just consolidation, which is one of the spend optimization methods that yields well from contract lifecycle, I'd be looking at 120 million in net savings at about a 5% gain. So 5% of 120 million in aggregate or otherwise consolidated spending would yield a net new savings of 6 million. So very quickly, we're looking at just shy of 10 million in the second case. So these numbers come together pretty quickly. These are realistic. These are meant to be business-facing, not analytics. And we certainly welcome the opportunity to both, provide you with additional raw input to your process, as well as to assist or offer any advice or counsel that we can. We're running a little tight on time. I'm going to sort of leave the About Altria slide up. As you can see, this is full enterprise contract lifecycle. So from the initial point of requesting that an agreement or a contract be issued, that could be through a portal, through your CRM, through your ERP, through the internal collaboration, external negotiation, execution, storage, report, performance, everything associated with the repository in the middle, to post-award compliance and obligation management to ensure that your customers are getting what they deserve and are being charged a fair amount for it, that your suppliers are delivering to you and that your service level agreements are being met, and that your risk assessment for your entire value chain is clear and tied back to the contracts that you've written. I'd like very much to throw this out for questions. I think we have just a minute or two. Let me see, I think we answered the renewable and expiry question. Bear with me here, just sort of taking a quick look. Thank you, question. Oh, what does UI? Please, yep. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one that I supported answer is related to the case studies. Where is the 5% gain coming from?
Excellent. So the 5% gain, which I think we had associated with the renewal management, is that when a sales organization revisits an existing contract and looks at the performance points or points of delivery or milestones between the organization and the customer, there is oftentimes identified either a price increase opportunity, right? 3 years has gone by, what's my net price increase? Before I renew automatically, I should let them know that the price is increased, right? So there's sort of the normal price list increase. We also see the increase in tangential service and additional support or change order, even in the product world.
One here as well asks, just one really makes the comment your focus is around the sales tied into contract lifecycle management. Is there anything in your solution which will enable or detract from being able to support contracts on the buy side, other than they don't want to know about source to pay, because I guess those tend to be covered very often within ERP systems, but certainly for the more complex form of contract. I think that's really where your origins were, in fact, wasn't it?
It was. In fact, as an organization, the Altria CLM is based on a Forrester award-winning product called iContract from Zycus. And it was a Forrester winner for buy-side contract lifecycle management. So we had our initial roots on the procurement side. I know we only used, I think, one of the 6 ROI methods. We only went into it a little bit, but there are other ROI methods for procurement for the supply chain or the value chain, and the integration for contract lifecycle for SLA measurement, milestone measurement, even hitting things like delivery under overs for raw or direct material, absolutely supported as part of our obligation and milestone tracking. So while we tend to think even about renewals and expiry, those are also very valid on your supply chain or buy side. So it's a great question from the audience and a great catch by Tim. Yes, that is how we started, and we've simply expanded into the broader CLM space as a standalone offering.
So Arthur, I'm sorry, but obviously we are out of time. I think we've managed to cover at least a good number of the questions, one way or another. Thank you very much to the audience for those. And of course, if you do have any follow-through questions, don't hesitate to send them to us, or of course send them directly to Arthur, or go meet him at booth number 14 in Toronto. My only departing comment would be, if you're struggling with this, and obviously a lot of people listening today are absolutely, as they said, looking at either actively evaluating or thinking about contract lifecycle management, make sure that you have really focused your attention on your corporate goals and strategies. What is it that your executives are saying matters from a business point of view? Is it that they need to drive up levels of trading partner satisfaction and buy or sell? Is it that they need to increase speed? Is it that they need greater agility? Quality, whatever it may be. What are the competitive forces? And make sure that you're positioning your business case against the things the executives are saying that really matter. We're finding in many cases that is not so much right now about headcount reduction, particularly in an area like contract management, because as I think Arthur has illustrated, that's a sort of nice to have bonus, but hey, I'm afraid not too many CFOs are going to be too thrilled by getting rid of half a dozen people. Talk to them about 600 and their ears might perk up. So that, in our experience, is actually not often the way to go. What is the way to go is all those many other areas of increased efficiency, the revenue drivers, the cost reductions that Arthur has touched on. And, in many ways, Arthur, I think you know too, that you've almost touched on some of the easy to grab stuff, the tip of the iceberg that's showing, as opposed to really digging down into, in fact, a lot of the improvements that do follow from automation. So I know Arthur will be delighted to talk with you further if you wish to know more, as will any of us here at IACCM. So thank you for being with us today. Arthur, thank you very much for your time, experience, and insights to the ways that people can really begin to drive this return on investment.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And as always, Tim, thank you very much for your insights and sharing IACCM's view. Thank you.
Goodbye for now, everybody.